This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. The U.S. Navy has 2 ships off the coast of North Carolina on standby to help with relief efforts. As the storm slowly moves away from the Carolinas, it could still dump more rain and produce flooding. The worst part, Florence has claimed the lives of at least 18 people. We have team coverage with CBN's Heather Sells and Eric Rosales. We begin with Eric.
After 4 straight days and nights of pounding rain and howling wind, we're starting to see a break in the clouds. But take a look at this. This is one of the local rivers here. And look at what it's doing to Highway 40. It's eroding the road. And it's not the only one. The storm is speeding up as it exits the Carolinas, but it's still dumping rain, lots of it. More than 30 inches in some places. Rescue teams are out in full force, pulling about 1,000 people from their flooded homes, and shelters are overwhelmed. Wilmington is now cut off, and officials are planning to fly food and water into the city of 120,000 people.
This storm has never been more dangerous than it is right now.
Neighborhoods look like a war zone, roadways impassable, streets are a maze of fallen trees.
The next half of the tree went and hit the roof, knocked the chimney down onto my first floor den, and that knocked a hole in the roof.
While nature is punishing the Carolinas, neighbors from nearby states are stepping up to help. These men traveled from Tennessee, small business owners who say they are just doing what God wants them to do.
It just seems like the right thing to do. You know, help people out. You know, they got to be able to get back to their homes. They can't do that unless we clean it up.
Just the need to give back, you know. Lord's blessed us, we bless others.
I've driven around the town a little bit. I can see how badly we've been hit. It's going to take a lot of people like this coming down to help us recover. We ain't going to be able to do it by ourselves.
As the storm moves off to the west, inland residents are not out of the woods just yet. All that water is going to flow off of the mountains into local rivers, and we could see more scenes like this in the future. From Wilmington, North Carolina, Eric Rosales, CBN News.
Sells reporting in Lenoir County, where Joseph Noble thinks water might overtake his home. His church helped him clear out Saturday night. Just 2 years ago, Hurricane Matthew flooded it, but government red tape has kept him here. This time, he sent his wife and children to Charlotte.
They're not going to be able to get back to what was home before they left, and I don't know if there's going to be a home to come back to when they come. I mean, we just at this point, we just don't know.
The Neuse River is the threat, and forecasters believe it and 5 others will burst their banks and flood their communities. Noble's pastor fled his home Friday night.
Between the tornadoes, between the water rising so quickly, we just knew that while we could get out, we needed to get out.
Much of North Carolina is still very much wait and see, watching the rivers and preparing for as much as 40 inches of rain. For those evacuating, the question has been where to go, especially with Florence threatening such a wide area. More than 17,000 have sought out shelters, including Tamika Broswell. She came just minutes after police knocked on her door.
I grabbed what I needed, a few things, and I just came safety first. You know, I had to, think about myself and my children.
On Sunday, a few in the town of Kinston ventured out to inspect the river that runs through downtown.
I'm just trusting and believing in God and just keeping it calm and praying that the water don't come up, don't rise any more than what it is.
Those still in their homes are struggling to find gas and food. The concern is that the worst may be yet to come. And for many, it could be the second round of devastation in 2 years.
The human piece says, I'm fed up. I don't want to do this again. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I don't want to experience a flood again. But I know God's got me. I know He holds me in His hand, and I can count on Him.
Reporting in southeastern North Carolina, Heather Sells, CBN News.
Want to turn now to correspondent Chuck Holton, who joins us from Fayetteville, North Carolina, that is home to Fort Bragg and the Army's Airborne and Special Operations Forces. Chuck, how are things there now?
Well, Ephraim, you can see behind me, this is the Cape Fear River, and while some of the water in Fayetteville has gone down over the last 24 hours, the Cape Fear is still rising. They're saying that this thing could top out more than 10 feet higher than it is right now. that means that by this time tomorrow morning, right where I'm standing, I could be up to my neck in water. We've already seen just in the last couple of hours this river coming up more than a foot. And so people are preparing for that. There's a lot of onlookers that are here taking pictures, and because this is something, once it tops out, that will be a record without a doubt.
Chuck, although soldiers at Fort Bragg are in the path of the storm, many of them stayed and helped instead of evacuating, correct?
Well, most of the soldiers that I know of evacuated under orders from Fort Bragg. There were some who stayed behind, essential personnel especially. The soldiers that I have seen on the streets out here have all been National Guard soldiers from the local area and from North Carolina as a whole. And they're going around and doing welfare checks on houses, helping with security, and even helping in some of the rescues.
As you're there, what kind of stories are you hearing from people?
Well, the biggest thing I'm hearing is that they're having trouble getting back into where they came out of. So one of the reasons that people are sometimes hesitant to evacuate is because they're afraid they won't be allowed back in after the storm is over to, make sure that nobody gets in and steals their things. We have heard some reports of looting or robberies taking place in the aftermath, but we're not in the aftermath yet. And part of the reason that people aren't able to get back in is not because they're being prevented by the authorities, but because they're being prevented by these high waters. Some of the places where I was yesterday in Lumberton are inaccessible now, except by boat. And so we've seen a lot of these civilian rescue agencies. There's one right here that's prepared to rescue people if necessary. They've been, again, going into these places where people chose not to evacuate from, and now they don't have any choice because they're cut off by the rising floodwaters, and they're helping people. This is a great thing that I love to see. As you know, I travel around the world, and I've gone to lots and lots of disasters everywhere you go. And it's rare to see the kind of people helping people that you see when you go to a natural disaster in the United States. One of the things that makes Americans special is that we love to help people in need. And people are coming from literally all over the country, thousands of miles away, pulling their boats and bringing their trucks and bringing supplies to help people in need, and doing it all on their own dime.
As you watch all this unfold, how long do you think the recovery will take there?
Well, I don't even think we're into recovery mode yet, because as I say, there are 17 major rivers in North Carolina that have not yet crested. They're not yet hit the top of their flood stage, and almost all of those will be record-setting flood stage when they get there. And so we're going to have to see the extent of that damage. They're saying that they might not even top out until probably Thursday because of all the rain that's now falling up in the mountains that has to drain out this way through rivers like the Cape Fear here behind me.
All right, Chuck Holton reporting for us there. It sounds like things could get worse before they get better.
That's true.
CBN's Operation Blessing is on the ground in North Carolina, helping those in need following Florence's massive rainfall and flooding. Volunteers are distributing water, food, hygiene kits, and flood buckets to those in the hard-hit area of New Bern. Operation Blessing is also in Lumberton, where workers are helping those who haven't seen help from anywhere else. Streets flooded there quickly as it is so close to a river. They're also working with area churches to continue to help in the days ahead, and you could see a full report of their work right now at cbnnews.com. Hope is fading in the Philippines following the deadly typhoon. It buried people seeking refuge in a chapel. There were 40 to 50 miners and their families inside the building, buried in a landslide. Rescuers now there are saying that all are likely killed. In Hong Kong, crews are clearing fallen trees and wreckage left behind by that same storm. Typhoon Mangkhut left the Philippines and hit China. At least 2 people are dead. Rain and strong winds are expected to continue there through Thursday. Thousands of foster children may be getting powerful psychiatric drugs prescribed to them without basic safeguards. The Health and Human Services Inspector General's office found about 1 in 3 children were either prescribed psychiatric drugs without treatment plans or follow-up, which is standard in normal medical care. The reverse is also happening with children who need medication to help them function at school or get along socially. The government is looking into the need to raise and change standards. Another study shows about 2 million American teens are now vaping marijuana. That's 1 in 11 students who have used marijuana in electronic cigarettes. That's up from 2016, when nearly 9% of students surveyed said they use an e-cigarette to smoke pot. U.S. health regulators recently gave the 5 largest e-cigarette makers 60 days to produce plans to stop underage use of their products. Coming up, Bible study in the White House. CBN News updates what's happening among the nation's leaders who gather to study God's Word. We've got that story when we come back. Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona says he is not comfortable voting for Judge Brett Kavanaugh for the time being. This comes after the Supreme Court nominee is accused of sexually assaulting a woman in high school. Kavanaugh emphatically denies the claim and says he is willing to speak to a Senate panel about the allegations. A California professor claims the justice nominee sexually assaulted her at a high school party. The woman shared her story confidentially with California Senator Dianne Feinstein. She forwarded it to the FBI last week, but details were later leaked. 65 women who knew Kavanaugh in high school have defended his character. One thing you don't hear much about in the Trump administration is the strong faith within the cabinet. But the White House has a Bible study that CBN News has covered. As CBN's Jenna Browder reports, it is still going strong. She talked with Energy Secretary Rick Perry about how faith makes all the difference.
If you'll bow your heads, I'll do the prayer.
Faith on display at the highest level.
God our Father.
This recent cabinet meeting with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo leading in prayer. And it's not just here or for the cameras.
There are a number of men and women on the cabinet who have Bible study every Wednesday morning.
Energy Secretary Rick Perry is a regular.
Number one, it gives us an opportunity to see each other and outside of our normal work environment. But it's also sending a message that this administration bases its life experiences on that biblical values.
The Bible study is led by Ralph Drollinger of Capitol Ministries. Along with Perry, Secretaries Mike Pompeo, Betsy DeVos, and Ben Carson all attend. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and Attorney General Jeff Sessions also take part. And Vice President Pence goes when he can. And each week, President Trump gets a copy of Drollinger's teaching.
I really admire the president.
Perry gives Trump a lot of credit for his leadership.
Well, you know, it starts at the top from the standpoint of this is a president that's not afraid to stand up and say, hey, I'm not perfect, but I know the guy that is perfect, and I'm trying to follow those instructions, and that's a really good place to start from my perspective.
When it comes to the naysayers, Perry poses this question.
I always ask people who are, you know, sometimes critical. When I was the governor of Texas about, you know, actions that we might have taken, and I said, you know, I try to be instructed biblically, and which one of the 10 Commandments do you not like?
It's one that's hard to answer.
Help us to maintain the honor.
And when you see the fruits of their labor.
All of which we ask in the name of our great friend and master of men. Amen.
Equally hard to criticize. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Still ahead, the new movie Unbroken Path to Redemption debuts at the box office. How well did it do? We've got the story coming up after this. The powerful faith story of Louis Zamperini opened over the weekend, finishing in the top 10 with an estimated $2,350,000. It picks up where the last movie left off after he comes home from being a prisoner of war.
If you're going to train for London, you have to do it right. Just go nice and easy, see if you can make it all the way around.
You think you can run a 4.7 mile again? I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. I don't run to run. I run to win.
Louis Zamperini's real-life story
Perfect. Moving on. Nice job, guys. Thank you.
is made for the movies. He was an Olympic distance runner, a World War II veteran, and a surviving prisoner of war.
You will never escape me. Wherever you go, I will find you.
Are you sleeping well? Are you having any night sweats or nightmares?
I just thought I'd be able to forget everything.
I want to go home.
There is no home.
His story returns to the big screen in Unbroken: Path to Redemption, a long-awaited follow-up to Angelina Jolie's 2014 epic war drama, Unbroken.
We have nighttime sky, right?
Harold Kronk directs this film, alongside producer Matthew Baer, who worked with Jolie on the first film.
The first film was a horrific, tragic story of his fight for his life, and this second film is his struggle to save his soul.
There's nobody more inspirational than Lou Zamperini, especially as portrayed in the film, with all of the terrible things that he goes through.
When I was a kid, I lived near Torrance.
Are you kidding me?
You still have the scars from where those runners spiked you?
Yeah, they got me pretty good.
And that?
Jack did that one.
This chapter introduces audiences to Louis' Cynthia.
Hey, would you like to?
Yes. What took you so long to ask?
The war is over, but are we seeing a war play out on screen in this family's life?
Oh, yes, we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yes.
he physically left prison, but he's very much in prison in his head, and
Yeah.
it causes a lot of struggle between the two of them.
Yeah. What's nice about this, too, is that oftentimes you'll see war movies, and then they try and... It's very important to show the human element of war films so that people can relate to the experience that, let's be honest, most of us will never have or have never had. What's nice about this movie is that it's a human experience that we've all had in some form or some capacity.
He said that we were at war, but it didn't feel like war, Not to me. It wasn't until I was stationed in San Diego. One day, this hospital ship comes steaming in. They were carrying all these guys, missing legs and arms. They were all torn up, blind, burnt. That's when the war became real to me.
Luke, how would you describe this chapter of your dad's life and seeing it on the screen?
This is the climax of the story of my father's life. All that he went through before with the athletics and the Olympics and the life raft and the prison camp, the climax is when, after him spiraling out of control with post-traumatic stress disorder, that he's able to come to faith on that evening in October 1949 and change his life. It is the climactic part of his entire story.
With vintage cars like this pretty red Ford, the stage is set for the 1940s. A young Lou Zamperini and his wife Cynthia are coming here to the tent you see in the distance to hear from a young evangelist who has not quite made a name for himself on the national scene.
I do not believe that any man can solve the problems of life.
Evangelist Billy Graham, whose grandson Will portrays him in the film.
I believe that God is still healing hearts. I believe that God is still transforming lives.
I feel like if you close your eyes and don't look, you really think you're listening to Billy Graham.
That's the way it was when we first met with him. That was what Harold and I spoke about, was
We watched the screen test, and Matt couldn't believe he sounds exactly like his dad.
Yeah, it was just fantastic.
But there's a lifeline. Just reach out.
I knew the story from Unbroken. I knew the story from my granddaddy's tales. So I know the story pretty well. And I've seen the movie, and every time I see it, I've seen it about 3 or 4 times now, every time I see it, I'm crying.
That camp meeting also began a lasting relationship.
They had a great friendship, lasted a whole lifetime, 2 lifetimes really. And but it just, we're grateful how God brought these 2 men together.
Coming up, ever thought about ways you can reach your neighbor with the message of God's love? We have one woman's idea and inspiration. It's still ahead. You know, sometimes it can be hard to step out of your comfort zone and show the love of Christ, even in your very own neighborhood. Kristen Shell used a picnic table to do what she knew God was wanting her to do, and she did it in her own front yard.
I knew that for the purposes of the party, I was going to have it in my backyard. But as soon as that party was over, I was moving that table in the front yard, and it was going to be a gathering place. And so I painted it turquoise, which is my favorite color. And I did. I put it outside underneath a tree in the front yard. It was awkward at first. I have this table, it's bright turquoise, it's sitting in the front yard, and now I'm like, well, now what do I do? So I took a whole bunch of stuff out with me. I took my phone and my journal and my computer, and I even I had some art stuff that I was working on because, you know, I needed to look like I was just doing something. By going out front, I was saying to God, here I am, Lord, your will be done. Go before, behind, and beside me into the neighborhood. And that very day, life changed, and I met a neighbor within 3 hours of putting a table out in my front yard. A lot has happened since putting the table out there. There are a handful of women who are now very close friends who I did not know. It has become kind of a gathering place.
I'm Bob. This is my daughter, Peggy.
So one of the best things is just the sense of normal community, everyday life. The neighborhood kids come over. They'll do homework when the weather's pretty. We've had lemonade stands, hot cocoa stands. More intimately, it's a place where I can meet and have met neighbors who now pop by with coffee and just for 15 minutes, a conversation over coffee that wouldn't have happened. The Lord has taught me, and I am learning to be present. It sounds like it should be a no-brainer, but listening is not a skill that came naturally at first to me, nor was being present.
This was really fun. It was great to see you here.
Loving my neighbors has taught me how to love God better. It's drawn me into deeper relationship with Him. You don't need permission or a program to go outside and be who Christ has called you to be.
A little prayer and a picnic table. You can find Kristen's full story at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join us again right here next time. Bye-bye.